Blog Talk Radio.
Hello everyone, this is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good morning. It is 6 o'clock here in the morning, Thursday morning, September the 9th, and I'm happy to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. We're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com, and the chat room is open if anybody's awake and would like to sit in there. I want to continue looking at the inner child and look at some of the affirmations that are on this website here that we've been looking at for a while. I'll give you the link. It's www.hopeforsurvivors.com /inner toddler, TODDLER.html. And so that's what we're looking at today, and I just appreciate everybody who's tuning in. It's just awesome. I'm not a professional counselor or therapist. I don't hold any certificates in those areas. I'm just a private citizen who pays to do my own shows, and I say this on every show just in case it's someone new who doesn't know. So you have to listen at your own discretion. You know, the topics of abuse are very sensitive. A lot of people find them very uncomfortable. And if you're a survivor on your healing journey, you might just be very careful what you're listening to and make sure you're in a safe enough place that, you know, you won't hurt yourself or somebody else, you know, if you're triggered by certain information, right? So make sure that you're in a safe place and, you know, have someone there with you when you're listening to this stuff or anything like it, right? It's very important. And if you're a young person under the age of 18, I just ask that you have someone listen to the show with you, because then they can help you make a decision whether you should be listening or not, right? I don't know how young the people are who are listening to my shows, and so because I'm not sure where the Blog Talk players are placed around, and so I think that it's just a good idea that young people, you know, you protect yourself at all times and have someone listen to the show with you so they can help you if you have questions, or, you know, maybe just make a good decision on whether you should be listening or not. There's a lot of adult content on my shows. That's why. It's ultimately about, you know, stopping child abuse and children and abuse, right? So, but it's just the topics of abuse are kind of scary, and a lot of people, if you haven't heard a whole lot about it, might not know what I'm even talking about or what it's all about, right? So it's a good idea to have someone listening with you. They can help you find the answers if you have questions about what I'm talking about or some of the material that we're looking at, right? Like I'm a survivor myself, and so that's why I just wanted to be one more voice, you know, for survivors because I know that so much shame surrounds child abuse, you know, shame and sometimes guilt and a whole lot of different emotions surround the whole issue, and so many survivors just remain silent because of that, you know. And I thought, man, no way. This shame does not belong to me. I can hold my head up high, and I can tell people my story, and I don't have to feel the shame associated with it because it's not my shame. The shame belongs to the abusers, and I'm so glad that I figured that out. You know, it took me a while. So it took me the better part of 42 years, or so 43 years maybe even. You know, it's only been recent that I've actually started to feel different about this, you know, and look at it in a different light. Because for the longest time I was carrying around a shame that didn't belong to me. And I talked about this not too long ago on some of my shows where I could picture all this abuse, you know, and all this stuff that my parents had put on me on a necklace around my neck. And I was just dragging this thing around, carrying it around. It wasn't even mine. It didn't belong to me. And I thought, why am I carrying this thing around? And I took off that necklace and I threw it away. And I feel so much better now because I don't have to carry that load anymore, you know, and you know, the shame didn't belong to me, and none of that garbage that they did to me or my family members, you know, belonged to us, you know what I mean? It's just so sad that people, you know, carry this stuff for so long in silence, and that's what I did, right? So that's why I'm doing this. I just want to be one more voice out there along with everybody else, you know, to encourage people to get some help, you know, whether it's a therapist, counselor, online group support. You know, if you want to remain anonymous, you don't even have to give your real name in that situation. You have to give your name when you're signing into the actual group site website, because they need to have an email address and all this. But when you're in the community, an online community, you don't have to give your real name. You can use a false name or whatever and keep yourself quite anonymous, you know. There's lots of reasons why people stay anonymous, and it's totally understandable. And so I decided that I wanted to, I'm using my real name, and that's because I'm going to do public speaking for the rest of my life. And so I wanted people to know who I was, and I wanted people to know my real name, because I'm going to go out Canada, first of all, try to go out nationwide here in Canada, and then as well as in the United States, and maybe even worldwide. and get involved with public advocacy, public speaking, to talk about child abuse and to, eventually go into schools. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and I eventually hope to be able to be part of the program that they have up and coming when the funding is there, to go into schools to talk to children and talk to teachers about child abuse and the whole issues surrounding it, and prevention measures, and pass out pamphlets and get information out to people. And I probably would be very interested in coordinating something like that and being a part of it, right? So, it's so important. That's why I wanted for people to know my name. It had nothing to do with being famous. I just wanted people to know who I was, because I will be involved with public speaking, right? And so, for me, it was good for me to come out and break the silence. And I feel so much better now that I have done that. So, I just wanted to be one more voice out there for people, just a voice of encouragement, to hold on, get the help that you need, whatever help it is, whatever works for you. And, because we deserved so much better, we really did. And we deserve to have a good life, right? But we're going to have to ultimately be responsible for taking that first step and reaching our hands out, because quite often people will not reach in to help us, and I know some people do. In my lifetime, I only had a few people in my life that were actually cared, right, that I had about the fact that I had been abused, and they actually knew and witnessed some of it. And later on in my adult life, I had a few friends who cared, but they couldn't help me, So that's why it's so important to reach out and get some help, right? Very important. So we'll get right into this here, this inner child work. This is from www.hopeforsurvivors.com. And Hope for Us has written these web pages and created this website. This is Hope for Us is a survivor, and she's read John Bradshaw's books, Homecoming, Reclaiming and Championing Your Inner Child, and also Healing the Shame That Binds You. And those are two books that John Bradshaw wrote. So what she's done is read those books and then gone through and created these websites for people, talking about her own story, because she's a survivor of all different types of abuse. You can see right on her webpage there how to contact her and what she's doing and whatnot. So it's just awesome. And I like what she's written here, and I like her stuff. And I never really, did a whole lot of looking into the inner child issue, right? How to console my inner child, right? So that's why I think this stuff is very interesting. And yesterday we left off with our inner infant self, right? Now today I want to look at affirm your inner toddler. It says, just as when you were an infant, you probably won't remember much from the time you were a toddler. It says, if you suspect that your needs were neglected or that you were outright abused as a toddler, she says here, I highly recommend you take the Index of Suspicion test starting on page 106 of John Bradshaw's book, Homecoming, Reclaiming and Championing Your Inner Child. So she says, just as when you were an infant, your inner toddler will have an internalized unmet needs from that period of your childhood, and it's an important part of recovery to acknowledge and affirm those needs now as an adult, right? So if we think, if we know that we were abused as toddlers, right, it's a good idea, or neglected even, right? It's really a good idea to go back and get in touch with our inner toddler self and say some nice things to our inner toddler, right? I sure know I need to hear them. My inner toddler would definitely need to hear some nice things, right? My parents were at the height of their problems with domestic abuse, domestic violence, child abuse, and everything else when I was a toddler. So it was pretty traumatic in our home at that time, and I don't think I was getting a whole lot of nurturing. I'm sure of it, because I was never nurtured later. See, so that's why it leads me to believe that I was never nurtured, period, right? I mean, it's obvious, like, if you're not nurtured as a small child. I think my mom tried, later on, especially when I hit school age, like, what most people would consider preschool age, because I went into school early. I started school because my birthday fell in December. Instead of putting me in late, they put me in early, so I was not even 5 years old when I started first grade, and I hadn't even gone to preschool. So talk about a shock, you know what I mean? It was... I had a lot of emotional problems just because of the home that I grew up in, and then couldn't even handle school. But we'll talk about that with the preschooler one. But I know I wasn't. My mom was trying. She would try to do these little things like set up a little tea party for me and my toys. Like if I had some dolls and whatnot. I had a doll that was almost life size, and my size, right? A small child, and she would set up little tea parties and put cereal in little bowls, little tiny little those kids' tea sets, right? And stuff like that. But in the meantime, there was a whole lot of traumatic events going on in the home. So she didn't have a whole lot of time to be paying attention to me, you know what I mean? I was the last child born, and she was very sick. And so, these little things I remember, she would do some things that were nice, and then I remember other things that she would do that weren't so nice. And so, I remember, like as a preschool age child, not getting a whole lot of nurturing, not a lot of cuddling, not a lot of, here, come sit with mom, let's read together. She was always kind of pushing me away, right? When she wasn't being downright abusive, she was just pushing me away because she needed her space. She had 7 children, and she was not happy. She wasn't happy in her marriage. She was just downright sick and tired. And so when I came along, it wasn't like, oh, this is my precious child. It was more like, oh, God, it's another one, and now I got to feed and take care of this one too. And oh, my God, it's just too much for her. And especially the circumstances that I came into the world in, which is just forced marital rape, right? So my mom was not happy about it. As much as I think I'm sure she loved me, and down in her side of her, somewhere down inside of her heart, I'm sure she did. But she didn't do a good job to show it, So that's the thing. And she rarely said it, especially as a child. I didn't hear, my parents were not saying I love you to anyone in that home when I grew up. Later on in life, when my mom started to realize that life was pretty short and that she was going to die one day, she actually started to say that she loved her children. But when we were small and really needed to hear it, because we would tell her, I love you, Mommy, or whatever, and it wasn't reciprocated, right? It's very hurtful to a child. And so, and a toddler, just needs that affection. They need that nurturing, right? So there's some inner toddler affirmations on this page. And it says, in addition to the affirmations that all the inner children need to hear, which is like, I'm glad you're here, I love you just the way you are, and I will never leave you, your inner toddler needs to hear affirmations that are specific to the second stage of child development. So they list them here. It says, let's say your name's Lori. Little Lori, it's okay to be curious, to want, to look, to touch, and taste things. I'll make sure it is safe for you to explore. So that's one of them, right? And if your inner child has a preferred name and it's not your own name, then you can use that, like, any name that your inner child or that you think your inner child would want to be called, right? This is what they're saying here. It says, here's some more, like, I'm here to take care of your needs. You don't have to take care of mine. And so that's something that we can say to our inner toddler. It's okay for you to be taken care of, little Lori, or whatever you want to name your inner child. It's okay to say no. I'm glad you want to be you. And it's okay for both of us to be mad. We will work our problems out. These are things that are very important, because as toddlers, if were abused or neglected as a toddler, quite often you can't say no. You can't get upset. You can't get mad because you'll be abused or berated or, in some way made to feel like you cannot express what you need to express. And toddlers, they have emotions and feelings and everything else that they need to express as well. It says it's okay to feel scared when you do things your way, right? And it's okay to feel sad when things don't work out the way you want it to. And it says you can be you and still count on me being there for you. These are things we can tell our inner toddler self, right? And I love watching you learn to walk and talk. I love watching you separate and start to grow up. And another one is I love and value you. So this is important, to do this self-affirmations and nurturing and whatnot, self-nurturing. If we didn't get that as small children, it's very important. But you have to, like John Bradshaw, it says, these affirmations were developed by John Bradshaw, and he recommends that you do some meditation to use them to affirm your inner toddler. He recommends that you devote an hour of uninterrupted time for this. So we're supposed to give some time to this. Like if we're going to sit down and actually try to get in touch with our inner child, inner toddler, inner infant, we can sit for a while and maybe do some meditation and just sit and relax and be calm and then really work with this and actually really go through it and speak to our little inner self with these affirmations, right? And in doing so, just by relaxing and meditating and just sort of breathing and calming down, we can get, probably it would mean a little bit more than just rushing around in the morning before work going, I love you, my little toddler. I just think it would probably would just sort of stay a little bit more solidified within ourselves if we did this. I agree with what he's saying here. So I'm going to try some of this stuff. I really am. I'm very busy this week, but I might have some time on the weekend to actually do some of this, and I think I'm going to do that. So his homecoming book includes some excellent suggestions for getting relaxed and in touch with your inner toddler before you say these affirmations. It says before you say them out loud to your inner toddler, first read them slowly and really let their meaning sink in. So what exactly, right? Like what they mean to you as far in context with your inner toddler, right? You can be you, and I like this one. You can be you and still count on me being there for you. It's like because if you were a toddler and you were not appreciated, and you were not made to feel loved and just cared about and just and I don't I don't know I just don't see anything wrong with loving children. I know a lot of people are like, well, we don't want to spoil the child, It's like children need love and they need care and they need that, you know what I mean? And you don't have to spoil them rotten. But I think spoiling children with love and care and concern is the best thing you can possibly do for them. And protecting them, right? So this is the thing, right? A lot of people are afraid to show any kind of love towards their children because they think, if I might spoil the child or something. And it's like, how ridiculous is that? Children basically, that's all they know when they first come into the world is after they get over their little, infant stage of crying and bawling because they need things done for them. They start to grow into these beautiful, precious little babies that need love and care and attention and they're so curious about everything and they just want to learn and they just want to explore and they want to start to see who they are in this world, you know what I mean? And who you are as a parent, So, it's so important to nurture your children and to help them, to find themselves, you know what I mean? And to accept them for who they are. So the next portion of this affirmations is the inner preschooler self. I want to take a look at that one. It says, unlike when you were an infant and toddler, you probably have some memories of your preschool years. You may have sufficient memories to realize that you were neglected and or abused during this stage of your childhood. It says, however, if you are not certain, then they suggest you can take this test, right? This index of suspicion from John Bradshaw's book. And it says here, if you are like me, affirming your inner preschooler can be much more emotional than affirming your infant and toddler. For one thing, she says here, I have very vivid memories from my preschool years, and this is when the sexual abuse started for me, she says. Since I was a twin, some of my developmental needs as an infant and toddler were received from my beloved sister. While my sister and I were left alone, often as infants and toddlers, suggesting neglect, we were able to use this time to develop a deep bond with each other. And we found love, acceptance, and security in the eyes of each other. And I think this is the reason that I did not internalize many unmet needs from these first two stages, because she had a twin, who was there for her. They were there for each other, right? Says she goes ahead and writes here, my preschool years were a different story. While I continued to enjoy the unconditional love and acceptance of my twin, it became painfully obvious to me that the eyes of my parents reflected less nourishing emotions. The eyes of my parents reflected lust, jealousy, pain, and downright evil. I needed to affirm my inner preschooler many times as an adult before I was able to feel that she believed what I said. And so this is the thing, right? You have to believe it, right? You can't just say it and then just be like, oh, well, it doesn't matter, I don't believe it anyway, right? You have to believe it. I know when I started to do a lot of affirmations here about 3.5 years ago, almost 4 years ago now, just saying I do count, I do matter, I'm going to fight this fight, I'm going to win this fight. I deserve so much better. I did not deserve the abuse that it was put on me. I started to go through these affirmations every day. I actually believed them. And as much as my inner self wanted to still feel, some of the stuff that I had been so used to feeling, which was this worthlessness, kind of always the lesser than worthlessness, self-worthlessness type stuff, right? I believed that I didn't deserve the abuse, right? So I was like, okay, I know I didn't deserve the abuse, and I sure know that I did count and I did matter for something, to myself even, right? I mean, if I didn't count and matter to anybody else, it didn't really matter to me. What mattered to me was that I counted and mattered to myself, and this is what, downright you have to get serious about, because we have to count and matter to ourselves, right? Because that's loving yourself, accepting yourself. you know, and I mean, it was hard. It's hard to do for survivors of child abuse because, you know, especially if you've been just battered down most of your childhood, you know, beaten down physically, verbally, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, right? It's hard to crawl up from that, you know what I mean? Because you grow up feeling these feelings and all of a sudden they become a part of you, you know what I mean? It's kind of like if you hear over and over again that you're just stupid, or, you know, like my parents would tell me things like I was evil all the time. Not my mom so much, but my dad. My dad was, because my dad's borderline schizophrenic and he's just downright crazy, really. He, as you know, when we were growing up, he would come and tell all of my siblings, not just me, all of my siblings, that we were evil. And then when I was a teenager, you know, he would quite often, like a young teenager, he would tell me that I was the root of the family's problems. I was evil. I was from the devil. And my mom, of course, was calling me every name under the sun. And really, I mean, she had a vocabulary that would shock just about anybody. She was very verbally abusive, and of course, just always making me feel really bad. And if I did something like, you know, anything, make a mess or spill something or whatever, she would berate me. And of course, I was just stupid and lazy and worthless. And so after you hear this sort of thing your whole life, right, you grow up like that, you start to kind of believe it. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, well, I knew it hurt, you know, and I knew it was hurting me that they were saying these things and doing these things, right? In the back of my mind, I was starting to think, yeah, I am just a worthless piece of, you know what I mean? I am. So then I started doing drugs and hanging around on the street, and really, it was really the only thing I could think of doing to kind of escape all that, right? And so, of course, I never dealt with it, right? So then as an older adult, you know, drug-free and just trying to get my life straightened out, I had to undo a lot of that, you know, and so I started with these affirmations, just saying, I did count, you know, I do matter. And so we have to do this even like for our inner preschoolers, right? If we have an inner child who is at a preschool point in our life, you know, where this inner child was very wounded as a preschooler, it's important to do this stuff for them, right? And to believe it. Let it sink down inside of you and actually you got to believe it. Like, for instance, you can say here this is the third stage of child development. And they say, here's some of the affirmations that they suggest here, right? This is from John Bradshaw's book. It says, little Lori, I'll just use my name, I love watching you grow. This is something I can tell my preschooler, right? And I can also say, I will be here for you to test your boundaries and find out your limits. And you can also say, it's okay for you to think for yourself. You can think about your feelings and have feelings about what you're thinking. So you can think about your feelings and have feelings about what you're thinking. Preschoolers, you know, if they don't get, if they're being neglected and mistreated, maltreated, abused, you know, quite often, you know, they might think something, might say something out loud, and then are abused for it. So pretty soon they start to shut down their feelings. They start to shut down their emotions about things, right? I know, like, we had to be very careful what we said in our home because the physical abuse was pretty serious, and so both my parents were very on edge all the time, and so, you know, they didn't want to hear anything coming out of our mouths, right? And they grew up in 1920s. They were both born in the 1920s and lived through the Depression era with abusive parents, and so they came from the backwoods of Nova Scotia, where children are not heard. You know, they might be there and they might be hanging around, but they're not heard. So they did not believe the children should be able to speak their mind. Right. So children, like my parents, you know, if something was going on in the home and one of us tried to speak up about it, you know, we quite often either be verbally abused for it or physically abused for it, just depending on how angry it made our parents, right? So we weren't allowed to express our feelings, right? And we weren't allowed to express what we were thinking or get involved. And quite often we did, and we paid the price for it. See, that's the thing. So then when you get older, you start to kind of shut that down a little bit. You know, we're like just very tend to just be more internalized, right, thinking stuff and not being able to get it out, right? And so that's the thing with preschoolers, very important, you know, if that was shut down and you were not able to have feelings about things and not able to express them, you know, this is something we can tell our inner child that, you know, it's okay that we can think about our feelings and that their feelings are valid and that, you know, they can have feelings about what they're thinking. It's okay for us to think for ourselves. So we can also say, here's another one, I like your life energy. I like your curiosity about sex. And it says, it is at this stage that normal, natural curiosity about sex begins. It says, if you were sexually abused during this critical developmental stage, it's the third stage of development, preschoolers, it may have caused you great confusion. My confusion was compounded by the fact that it was my father who was sexually abusing me, she wrote here, and required I keep this secret. She says here, when I did try to talk to my mother about the many things that confused me, I was told I was a bad girl. I had one parent telling me what he did was normal for daddies who love their little girls, and I had another parent who was telling me I was bad because I participated. So the adult me worked very hard convincing my inner preschooler of this affirmation, but it can be done. Don't give up if this one is difficult for you. So this is the one where she says, I like your life energy and I like your curiosity about sex, because preschoolers, that's where the actual natural curiosity begins. So that's the thing, we have to, some of this stuff might, really be a little hard to work through, but totally, and that's why it's a good idea to have somebody help you with this stuff, right? If you can't do it on your own and you need to, you just feel like you just can't cope or can't deal with this stuff, you have to get help. And there's lots and lots of good people out there. There's awesome people out there. I've talked to quite a few. I've never had a counselor myself. I would like to have one, actually. But the thing is I can't afford it right now. I don't have any benefits or anything. I have no money. So that's just going to have to wait. But the thing is they're out there. There's very nice, good, trustworthy people out there, but you do have to use caution. And you do have to realize that, if you find a counselor and a therapist that doesn't work for you, this is what I've read in so many websites. I've just seen this stuff everywhere since I've started looking into this stuff. That if you find a counselor or therapist who is not working for you because you just don't click, or that's just not their they don't specialize in what your issues are, then you have to move on and find another one that will work for you, right? Because eventually you'll find the right counselor, you'll find the right therapist, and they'll be able to help you get through this stuff, right? Or if you don't like that, try online group support. I like that because it's from the comfort of your own home. You don't necessarily have to go out. You can just remain somewhat anonymous, tell people what you want to say, and I just and listen to what they have to say. I find it very helpful. I like online group support for survivors of child abuse, and that's the route that I went, and I really thought that was great. It's nice to have somebody to talk to who relates and who can understand, right? And so, I just have to make sure that you do get help, that's all. So here's some more of these affirmations that she reads off here. It's okay to find out the difference between boys and girls. That's what we can tell our inner preschool self. And we can also say, I'll set limits for you to help you find out who you are. It's okay for you to be different, to have your own views on things. And it's okay to imagine things without being afraid they'll come true. I'll help you separate fantasy from reality. And another one is, I like that you're a boy or a girl. And it says, my inner school-age child, she says here, really needed to hear this since my father had told me how icky I was for being a female. It's okay to use affirmations from earlier stages if you feel that a particular affirmation is needed more during a later developmental stage of your inner child. She says here, sometimes the emotions that got stuck with an individual inner child may have been typically more age appropriate at an earlier stage. So this does not mean these feelings are not valid and still in need of acknowledgement. So another one here, she says, it's okay to cry even though you are growing up. A lot of tears may come after the adult you gives your inner child permission to cry, so have the tissues handy. That's the whole issue. My inner child was so raging, so fuming mad. I mean, we're talking raging, angry, unconsolable, really, as far as anger and rage went, right? So, about, almost 4 years ago, I started a lot of healing work at that point, and I started to allow, I've actually quite often throughout my life allowed myself to spend like a year just allowing myself to grieve or to cry if I need to. I'd still go to work, but I'd come home and I'd just allow myself to feel these things that I needed to feel, see, and that's why it very well might be that's why I'm where I am today in my healing. I'm not sure, but I'm just thinking because I allowed myself to feel this stuff. I allowed myself, but I knew I was safe enough because I knew that I was not going to kill myself. I used to have suicidal thoughts, but I was never suicidal. I didn't have any suicidal attempts, so I was okay with it. But the thing is you want to make sure you get help. We've got a minute left here. Make sure you reach out to someone. Call a crisis line. I'm serious. If I ever get to the point where I can't handle it, I'm picking up the phone and I'm calling a crisis line. I tell you that. My life is worth living. I do deserve to be here, and so do you. And that's what I'm trying to get across to people here, is that you do deserve to have a good life. You do deserve to heal and move forward and enjoy this life. You were not put here to suffer, and you were not put here to abuse. Neither was I. And that's why I decided, okay, I made up my mind. I'm fighting to win this fight. I'm fighting to stay alive, survive, and do better than survive. I want to be a whole person, right? I deserve to be a whole person. I was not put here to be abused and mistreated and to suffer my whole entire life. And that's why I hope that you will join me. So make sure you get help. If you have to, call a crisis line. Do whatever you have to do to get well, to get yourself well, to stay here with us, and to move forward on this journey. So take care, everybody. Have a great day. I'll be back on tomorrow morning, same time, same place. And if you need something, get a hold of me, Blog Talk Radio here or Facebook or wherever. Take care of yourselves, everybody. Have a great day. Bye-bye.